Bronte May is the first of my podcast guests to come about purely because of the podcast. She was mentioned in an interview I did with Jenny a few weeks ago. Jenny has Graves' disease, and she'd come across Bronte through her Instagram account as both someone who has Graves' disease and is a naturopath working with women with thyroid issues. So I reached out to Bronte, invited her onto the show, and you're going to love, I feel like she's my new friend. You're going to love this chat that I have with her. You will get that sense that both she knows firsthand the complicated nature of thyroid issues and the many layers of healing that needs to take place. We talk a lot about stress and healing and leveling up and taking time, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, to calm down, do some meditation and have a bit of time to yourself. You will learn from Bronte that she's had her experience with mainstream medical system. It was her healing herself through diet and lifestyle that led her to study naturopathy. And now she's really passionate about helping others to navigate their own autoimmune issues, not just masking symptoms, but actually delving into the root cause of the problems. You'll find Bronte most active on her Instagram account, but I'll make sure I pop the link to that and her website in the show notes so that you can connect with her. Enjoy this conversation that I've had with Bronte today. I do just need to make a small apology because we've both got a bit of background noise in our recordings. You can hear lots of birds chirping in mine, a little bit of, maybe building work or something going on in the background of Bronte. So just apologise in advance. It's not too bad, but just thought I would throw that out there at the beginning so you know to expect that. Welcome to Let's Talk Thyroid, where we explore different aspects of living a healthy thyroid lifestyle, positively and practically, to help you thrive and not just survive. Join me, Annabelle Bateman, your host, and let's talk thyroid. This podcast has been proudly supported by, me. I am fully backing my podcast and getting the Let's Talk Thyroid message out to you. If you are interested in purchasing essential oils, that is one of the ways that you can support me and I can support you, and essential oils can support your overall thyroid health and wellness. So if that's something that you would like to add to your health and wellness toolkit of resources that you can access to support you in a number of different ways, send me a message. I'd love to help you find what suits your individual needs and budget. Or you can head to annabellebateman.com and follow the links there to essential oils. But think digestive support, stress management, reducing your toxic load, all sorts of ways that we can use essential oils as part of our overall lifestyle approach to managing health and wellness. All right, well, welcome Bronte to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. So excited to have you on the show today. I love that this interview has come out from another one that I did recently with one of the Jenny, who's in my thyroid group, because she's got Graves' disease, and we were talking when I was interviewing her, and she said that she'd come across your Instagram and being really helpful, and so then I connected with you and. Here we are. So that's pretty cool.
I know, that was amazing. I was super chuffed when you reached out, and then I went and listened to the podcast and I had a chuckle about the earthing.
Yeah, and we can cover that in a bit too. But I like what I've been enjoying about the podcast is for me, and I guess I get to talk to everyone, it's that nice mix of just people sharing their stories and different experts with in different aspects of thyroid health. You have both of those, you're both of those. You're someone with a thyroid story and someone who now works with people with thyroid issues on a professional level. So, I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think it will traverse both of those things.
Yeah, amazing. I'm happy to share.
Well, maybe tell us a little bit of your thyroid story first, and then maybe that will transition into your naturopathy and the professional side of it. So as much as you want to share about your journey, like tell us a bit about your story.
There's so many things that led up to my thyroid journey now, knowing what I know, but I'll start from where I realized something was wrong. So I was working in an office and I remember saying to my colleagues, is this floor even flat in the office? They're like, yeah, what are you talking about, Bronte? Like, yeah, it's flat. I was like, are you sure? Like, it just seems to be on an angle. They're like, no, the floor's flat. And I was like, oh, it doesn't seem right. And I was noticing that I couldn't see the computer screen as well. Like my eyesight just felt off. Like I could still see, but it just felt weak. So I went and got my eyes tested. They're like, no, your eyes are fine. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've always been quite a thin frame, probably arguably underweight as a child. But I started to lose weight and I was eating all the time. I could not stop eating. I could have eaten 24/7. I just had this insatiable hunger and I thought that's really weird. What else was there? I had like a rash over my stomach and stuff as well. And this happened the second time. So anyway, I took myself for the first diagnosis because I was diagnosed twice. So the first diagnosis, I went off to the doctors. They ran some tests and they were like, oh, yeah, you've got overactive thyroid. I didn't even really know what a thyroid was at this point. I wasn't really explained very much at my GP. And I said, oh, what does all this mean? She said, oh, it's okay. You just take these tablets and you'll feel much better soon. And I did. I was prescribed carbamazole. It was a low dose. And, yeah, within 2 weeks I was feeling a lot better. But I knew that it wasn't in alignment for me to stay on medication, even though I guess in comparison to the average person, my life was at that point, like I thought that I ate really healthy and everybody thinks they eat healthy. But, like I'd always eat, I grew up on meat and 3 veg, and I would often cook that way as well. Anyways, so I had my hairdresser at the time said, oh, there's this amazing traditional Chinese medicine doctor. You should go and see her. So I rang this lady up and I told her how I'd been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And she said, are you on medication? I said, yes. And she said, well, I can't really give you Chinese herbs. I can do acupuncture for you, but I suggest that you go and see an Ayurvedic doctor because the medication works on different meridians. And so you'll be able to have the Western medicine as well as the Ayurvedic medicine. So that's what I did. I went and saw this Ayurvedic doctor and I went and got acupuncture from the traditional Chinese medicine lady. And then as I started to come off the Western medication through this process, I swapped over only to see this TCM. TCM is traditional Chinese medicine, to see this TCM doctor. And so that was my journey and I would see her quite regularly. I was cooking up herbs and stuff. And so I did that really regularly. I then ended up moving to Sydney and so I stopped taking all the herbs because I just didn't see anyone while I was in Sydney and I was like, oh, okay, I'm still fine. So within that process, I went off the Western medication within 7 months. And then so fast forward 3 years, moved to Sydney. Only went to Sydney for 3 months, did not like it. I was like, I need to go back to Melbourne. Went back to Melbourne and a series of stressful events happened in that time. I guess like the moving and stuff, but also job hunting. It was sort of the wrong kind of job for me at that point as well. My living arrangement wasn't the best living arrangement either. So I just had stress in all areas. I was stressed when I went to work. I was stressed when I went home and I started to feel very unwell. It was the middle of winter. I was sweating bullets in my sleep. I'd have to change my clothes in the middle of the night. And I was like, what is going on? I had this rash over my stomach, a rash over my back. You couldn't see the rash on my skin when I was wearing clothes, luckily, because I would have felt very insecure if it had of. What else? I had, again, the insatiable hunger. If I walk up a couple of stairs, I feel a little bit short of breath. There was way more symptoms the second time. I would go to the gym within 90 seconds of getting on the bike and not really pushing it that hard. My heart rate just went straight up to 189, just like that. I was like, whoa, what is going on? But I was super emotional, very, very emotional. I was crying every day. I was even crying at work and my boss was just like, what is going on? What's wrong? I'm like, I don't know. And I felt suicidal at that point. And I'd had depression and anxiety years prior to even ever having a thyroid condition. And I had worked through that with a mentor, and I had worked with a naturopath as well. And so I had a lot of tools in my toolkit to deal with a shitty day or to deal with any sort of anxiety. So I was like, why am I so upset? Like, I couldn't figure out why I was crying. Anyway, so I took myself off to the doctor. I asked them to test my heart initially. And luckily the doctor ran my bloods as well. The heart test came back, it was fine. But the bloods, they were like, whoa, like your thyroid is through the roof. And because I'd had a history of a thyroid condition previously, they actually looked at my antibodies as well. And they were like through the roof. At the top, like the measuring scale from that lab was up to 1,300 and my labs were at 1,300. They were like, no wonder you feel so bad. At least you know it's psychological. This is physiological. And my doctor assured me that I would feel much better within like 7 to 14 days of being on the medication. Anyway, they referred me to an endocrinologist. And when I went to see the endocrinologist, it was just so doom and gloom. Like, they didn't ask me anything about me. They just wanted to see the blood tests. They palpated my thyroid and test to see if I had any handshakes and anything like that. And then they were just like, all right, you've got a few options. Well, you've got 2 options really is what they gave me. And I asked about a third one. So the first option was you can get your thyroid taken out. And I said, okay, what does that mean? They said, you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. And I said, okay, what does this medication look like? Remembering at this point I hadn't studied, right? And I didn't know anything about, I didn't even know what a thyroid did, even though this was my second diagnosis. I never looked into it. I just trusted my doctor. They didn't give me the information. I didn't ask. I felt better. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, they said that the medication was very close to the hormones that your thyroid does create. And I was like, okay, but still I need to be on medication for the rest of my life. And I was like, okay, that doesn't sound right to me. And then the second option was to get your thyroid pretty much blown up, you know, the radioactive iodine pill that they talk to people about. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to be on medications? They said, yes. I said, okay, so what if I don't choose those and I stay on the anti-thyroid medication, the carbamazole? And they said, well, you really should only be on it for up to 12 months. Now, I've had clients who have been advised otherwise by their endocrinologist, but my endocrinologist said up to 12 months. And I said, why is that? They said it can affect your white blood cell count, which means it can increase your risk of cancer. So I walked out of that endocrinologist appointment. I was sobbing. You know, like when you're a little kid, you're like, and like you can't even like breathe properly. I couldn't even walk. Yes, I was so devastated. To me, and they handed me a little slip of paper about the radioactive iodine pill because that was their recommended option. And so with this radioactive iodine pill, on this slip of paper that they gave me, it had a warning that you can't even sleep in the same bed as your partner when you take this medication. For 2 weeks, you can't sleep in the same bed as your partner. I was like, hang on a second. So if my partner can't sleep on the same bed as me for 2 weeks, but it went into my body and not their body, what is it doing to me? And I was like, whoa, like that doesn't seem like a very good option for me. That seems pretty scary. So for me, those 3 options felt like you can die a slow death, you could get someone to shoot you, or like that's kind of felt like those sorts of options to me. And so I was just like, no, like I don't know what's going on. And I rang a friend who was actually a sleep apnea researcher actually, but because she understood medical jargon and things, I rang her and I was so upset. And she's like, breathe, because like she couldn't even understand me. And she just said, look, I can't say this is going to save your life, but I think that it's going to help your health in some way and it'll get you time to make a decision. You need to go paleo. Is what she said to me. I was like, well, what does that mean? She had told me 2 years prior to that when she went paleo that I should go paleo. And I was like, yeah, paleo, schmaleo. It's like one of those like lemon diet, Atkins diet, whatever. Like it's just a fad. And so we would have these weekly catch-up calls and she would explain to me like why no grains, why no dairy, why you should, choose organic meats and things like that. And what fats does in your diet and things like this. So she would explain all these things to me and I became so obsessive about reading about the paleo diet. Then I came across the Autoimmune Protocol. which is essentially the paleo diet, but then it's specific for people with an autoimmune. And so then I became obsessive with reading about that and diving into that. And so I think my whole reset process, because I did paleo for about just maybe under 2 months or around 2 months, and then I found the Autoimmune Protocol, and then I did that for 3 months. So my reset process was probably about 5 months. But within 3 months of even doing the paleo with then 1 month of the autoimmune, my antibodies dropped from 1,300 down to 221. And the only thing I did at that point of my healing process was my diet. I had no idea about all the other aspects to healing. I went back into the endocrinologist. So the first time I went back into the endocrinologist was 6 weeks later, because they gave me 6 weeks to make a decision. And I told them, I've decided not to choose any of your 3 options. I've created a 4th option. They were like, what? So what are you going to do? And I said, well, I've decided I'm going to heal myself with food. And they were like, what? I think you're crazy.
Yeah. And did they wash their hands of you? We don't want you anymore?
No, I stayed in the system for 2 years well, actually, it was my TCM doctor who said, it's better that you stay in the system anyway. Just keep them on side. And then, if anything happens, at least you have the support of the system. Not really the support of the system, but I can't remember how she worded it. I ended up seeing it as a little bit of an interesting experiment, because through the process of me being unwell and then healing myself, and at that point I knew with food, I became super passionate about learning about all of this. And I was like, oh my goodness, I want to learn to study. And it was actually a girl that I worked with in corporate who was studying nutrition who said to me, you should study. At that point I was 35. I was like, oh, I'm too old to study. But I did. I dove into study. It was a mix between my own passion, my friends saying that I think you'd be amazing because you sound so passionate when you talk about it, and the little bit that got me over the hurdle of fear of being 35 and commencing study was a guy that I was a PA for. I was working in construction. He had a spinal cord injury. And that happened within 6 months of me working at that company. And so I saw him come back to work after he got out of rehab, and he just got on with stuff. Like his whole life and routine had been turned upside down, and he got on with it. And I was like, oh my goodness, if he can learn how to transfer from a wheelchair to a toilet, do transfers into cars, learn how to dress himself and shower himself and stuff in the morning and be completely independent after a spinal cord injury, I can go and study. I can get over those
It's a different perspective then. Wow.
Yeah.
People are amazing, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's why I kind of dove into my study, and I love it. I love it. I love that I get to help other women heal. I love that my story is also so powerful, that absolutely you can heal. You just need to find the keys to your own healing journey. And so that's what I help facilitate with my clients.
And I think that adds to the passion, doesn't it? I mean, I think what you said earlier on is when you were first diagnosed, you didn't really dive into it, didn't really know what the thyroid did. It wasn't until the second time, and it's like, right, okay, now I've really got to, dive into it. I mean, I would be the same. Like, I think I had a general understanding of what the thyroid did. I was diagnosed at 23, but I don't think I think I still have. Every time I read about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, that, it just adds and adds and adds to the depth of understanding of what it does. But if I didn't have a thyroid condition, I wouldn't really know anything much about the thyroid. So,
no, it's like, we probably don't know about joint health, or if you don't have, reproductive issues, or you don't have some sort of, menstrual issues, then you're not going to dive into that area on a deep level. It's when things affect us personally. And I think that's what I love about what I do as well, because I understand the journey that my clients are walking on, because I've walked it too, sometimes crawled in tears.
Yeah, and it gives you credibility, because you're not just, not that every practitioner has to go through, I guess, what their patients are going through, but it does help to know that the person gets it, it does.
Yeah.
It does help.
Well, I know from my process, I saw a lot of different practitioners. And they all would have helped, but looking back now, I wish I had found someone that really got it, and that really understood about the healing process to healing an autoimmune, because it's a little bit different than healing from just the general, your thyroid's a little bit out of balance. There's many more keys to unlock for autoimmune.
Yeah, and so you talked a bit about the dietary stuff, and obviously food has made was a key part of your healing process. What other factors do you see what were some of those other keys in unlocking healing for you?
Yeah, so for me, I figured out when I was studying to become a naturopath, because I did that full-time while working full-time. A little bit insane.
Of course you did, yeah. You are a thyroid. I mean, the more people I talk to with thyroid conditions, we definitely have a personality, and I think it's called overachieving. Yeah, or high-pressured or something. So, of course, you studied full-time and worked full-time. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And my naturopath at the time said to me, because my antibodies went up again, like went through the roof again. And it scared me, because he said to me, you need to figure out what you're going to do part-time, because you can't do both full-time, because your body probably won't survive through doing full-time work and full-time study. I was living in Melbourne with I didn't have family in Melbourne. I wasn't from there. I'm from Queensland, which is where I've moved back to now. But so I couldn't just move home to save money, right? And so I looked into going into share houses, and so that I could go part-time at work. But to go part-time at work, to even drop one day, significantly affected my salary. It was at least $1,000 a month that it was affected by just dropping one day. And I was like, whoa, like that's a lot. And I wasn't going to save that much money by going into share house. And I was like, all right. So a bit like when I found the fourth option when I went to see the endocrinologist, they gave me 3 options. I created a fourth. I was like, just because this naturopath is sitting in that seat and he has more knowledge than I do about health, it doesn't mean he has all of the knowledge about what I should be doing on my journey. So again, I listen to my own intuition, and this is a key thing that I like to tell my clients. You know better what is the next step for you, because your intuition is inside of you. It's your body. It's your journey. And so I decided to create another option for myself, and I looked into meditation. I downloaded Deepak Chopra's meditation app. You have to pay for it, and I didn't care. I loved it. And so I implemented meditation a couple of times a day. It was the first thing I did when I woke up, and it was only like 5 minutes each time. He talks about a little topic, and then you can set the time of the meditation that you want. So I set mine to either 5 or 10 minutes. And so he'll talk about a little topic. He'll give you a Sanskrit mantra to repeat while you go into the meditation. He dings the little bell, the little sound healing bowl, and then leaves you to sit there to repeat the mantra, because otherwise we get caught up in our thoughts. And then at the end of the 5 or the however many minutes you've set your meditation for, he'll chime the singing bowl again, and you come out of the meditation. And then he always ends with namaste. So, yeah, I did that, and that was the last thing I did before I went to bed. So I did it 3 times a day, and at that point in my life I was obsessed with checking my bloods, and I was so obsessed with my diet, thinking it was the only thing that was going to save me. And every time my bloods went out, I was like, what did I eat? Not knowing that, oh, my goodness, it could be your stress, sweetheart.
Yeah, yep. I've been there too. It's all good.
And so I would test my bloods every 7 to 8 weeks. 7 weeks later, I retested my bloods. The only thing, again, that I changed was the meditation, and those antibodies dropped. So I think, and there's so many other keys as well, but like that is major when it comes to a thyroid issue. And it comes to any health, it's managing your stress, because if you don't manage your stress, there's a knock-on effect to your digestion, your hormonal system, your sleep, the way you show up, like how you manage yourself through the day. If you can't manage your stress, then you can't think clearly. Your day doesn't run as smoothly. So I just think it's a beautiful practice to start your day with, and it only takes a couple of moments to go there.
So while we're talking about stress, that's obviously been the key, the meditation, or has there been other things that have helped you manage stress, reduce stress, remove stress?
So the other thing for me is just having that morning practice. So I think your other guest mentioned about how I earth. And I love it. There's so many benefits to earthing. It's like a defrag for the nervous system. It's like love notes to your body to be able to put your bare feet on the earth. And it only takes, I mean, if you only did it for 5-10 minutes a day, that's better than none. If you can do it for 20 minutes, amazing. So what I do in the morning is I will, and it's in no particular order, but it's just part of my complete practice, is that I will get up and I will have my gratitude practice, and I'm grateful for even just the smallest things. The fact that I got to wake up today. I send love to my thyroid every day, and it sounds so hippie, but it's all, we are energy, we are frequency, right? And so if we can get into that space of gratitude and love for ourselves foremost, and then we can show up in that way for the rest of the day, right? And so I do those practices of breath work, gratitude, I do visualizations, and I meditate, and I sit on the grass and I do it. And I have my bone broth. And so my bone broth is for your gut health, because everything starts in the gut. Hippocrates was a famous physician way back in the day. He's a Greek physician, and he said that death starts in the gut. And we learn that, when you study anything about health, and so gut health is foundational.
That's what I find, that it's those little things that you do every day that you think in the moment, surely that's not such a big thing. But when you're consistent and each day over a period of time, it really makes a massive difference.
Yeah. I mean, there's some days where I don't do all those things. I do notice if I don't earth for like 2 or 3 days, I feel it in my body. I just feel like internally I feel like static on the TV. And then I just go and sit on the grass and take some deep breaths and connect in with myself again. And I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. Because sometimes life gets away from you and you don't have, I don't know, something happens today and you've got to get up and go straight away to somewhere. Yeah,
it's not about perfection, a perfect routine every day. It's the over time lifestyle.
I don't beat myself when I miss it. I probably wouldn't miss taking bone broth, because it's just, some people are addicted to having coffee every day. Mine's bone broth.
So do you make it in a big batch? Tell us how you make your bone broth.
I haven't made my own bone broth for quite a while. I was buying it in Melbourne. I buy a couple of different brands. So I'd buy like the jelly type that I would make my soups with. I like Nutra Organics. It comes in a powder form, so it's amazing if you're on the go and traveling and you don't have a refrigerator. My other favourite, but it needs to go into a fridge once it's opened, is Best of Bone.
When you've got thyroid patients, are your patients mostly got Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, or both? Like, is it a bit of a mix?
Both. I feel like maybe more people gravitate towards me that have Graves because of my story, but I do have other people that have Hashimoto's as well.
Yeah. And do you see a commonality between them, or tell us a little bit about the differences and the similarities in, because it seems to me like the opposite ends of the same spectrum, but I know people can fluctuate. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so you can have symptoms of the other type of thyroid issue, but generally I find the thing that is so common with everybody is that everyone's so tired. All my clients are so tired, they're so fatigued, they're not sleeping well. The other common thing is that they all have digestive issues, and without knowing it, because they think it's just normal, they have menstrual cycle issues as well. So whether like their period's too light or it's too heavy, it's irregular, they have painful periods, they have bad PMS, that's quite common. But I think that's common with women, and people think because it's common that it's normal, but it's not. But going back to more of the thyroid symptoms, okay, so when it's overactive, your body is running so fast. So everything is going fast. So you get the heart palpitations, you feel so hot all the time, you feel irritated, you feel anxious. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, so they're always hungry all the time as well, and they're losing weight because their body is just running so fast. Although I do have some clients that when they're on the carbamazole, they find that they can't lose weight, so they're putting on way too much weight. And then on the other end of the spectrum, when it's hypos or Hashimoto's, those people are generally really cold because their body is running so slow. They're also very fatigued. Those people often have skin, hair, and nail issues as well. They feel more on the depressed side. Although I had depression, even though I had Graves, I just felt so depressed. And then so with the digestion, when it's the hypo, so the underactive, they tend to be more constipated, whereas on the overactive side, they tend to have like the loose bowels. There's so many different symptoms that can pop up, but all of them will have digestive issues. Like I said, it comes back to gut health.
I mean, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the autoimmune, say particularly with the autoimmune protocol, but making those dietary changes that address the underlying inflammation seem to be fairly consistent whether you've got Graves or Hashimoto's. There's similar dietary approach. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. Definitely dietary approach. I mean, it's not going to be the whole thing, but it definitely, that's where the healing starts, because you need to heal up the fuel tank. Like if your car has holes in it and you're pumping fuel into it, your car's not going to run very far. Same as if you're putting the wrong fuel into that vehicle. Like if I go, well, screw it, fuel's a bit expensive today, I might just pump some water into the fuel tank. The car's not going to run very far. And so it's ensuring that we understand that about our own body, that we put the right fuel in. A lot of people think that it's more expensive to eat clean, but I don't think it is, because if you're not, you're going to be spending so much more on your health anyway if you're eating out of packets and things. So
pay now or pay later.
Exactly. So being mindful of what you put in, being consistent with that. But the best place to start is through what we put in our mouth. We open our mouth multiple times a day. So is what you're choosing to put into your body moving you towards wellness or illness? I think that's an important question to ask. Is it nourishing your body or is it causing inflammation?
Yeah, it's a really helpful thing, because it is one or the other, really. And diet's made a massive difference to me. So, I think that it seems to be, and I know it's not always the starting place, but it seems to be a fairly easy place to start. Well, not easy, actually. I shouldn't say easy, because often making dietary changes is really hard, because it really we get confronted with a whole lot of our relationship with food, and we can feel deprived and all of that emotional stuff. So it's not easy, but it can have such a profound effect.
But so many of us eat from emotions, right? We emotionally eat. And we reward ourselves with inflammatory foods, and that's been instilled in us. This is something I talk to my clients about. When you're a child, you do really well, you do something really well, and your parents are super proud of you, and they go, let's go celebrate, let's go get pizza and ice cream. And that's inflammatory. You have a birthday, and it's like, okay, let's celebrate. And it's just like sugar and all these inflammatory foods sitting on the table, right? And this is how we've been conditioned. And so it's learning to become more aware of that and undoing those conditionings.
I know. And I talk in my challenge that I run around finding some non-food rewards. Like, what are some non-food ways that we can reward ourselves? Touching on the layers of healing, we've talked about food and managing stress and different keys to that. Before we started the interview, you were talking about like leveling up your healing.
Yeah, so healing, as we know, all of us that are on that health healing journey, it's so not linear. Like you cruise along and then boom, something happens. And you're like, oh God, like what have I done wrong? And, that's just part of the healing process. You get to a certain point and then you get asked to level up. And I see, what did I say? It's like the Mario Brothers, you're like ding, ding. And you level up and go along. And
yeah, I love that.
You go along in the little game and like you pick up certain tools that get you to the next level. And it's the same with your healing. You learn along the way. Like for me, like I explained, I thought it was all about diet until it wasn't. And I was like, oh gosh, there's another key to this puzzle. Okay, let's put the meditation there. And then you get so far with that. And then you realize that there's other keys as well to unlock. And there isn't just one practitioner that's going to get you through that whole complete journey, depending on what makes up my clients' current health status. I may be able to give them a couple of keys to that. And then I'm like, okay, I can only get you this far. And then, I help them find another practitioner that's going to help them through the rest of those doors. And it's about knowing to trust your own intuition with that. Like I saw so many different practitioners along my healing journey. And now I have enough tools that I know where to find people, or I know what to do next with myself to go deeper. But what were we talking about? I think we spoke about emotional part, the emotional aspects to healing. That's massive. And oh my goodness, it's a can of worms, because these emotions or traumas that happen, when we all have them, when you're a child, you don't necessarily have the tools to process those traumas. And if your guidance, so your parents, whoever were your guides as a child, and so if your parents didn't have those tools, then they didn't help you through it either. So what happens to those feelings that are attached to those traumas? They get suppressed and we push them down, but they're still in there. And so it's learning how to, get to the root of those traumas and heal them and love all those pieces back, And so, I help with a certain degree with that with my clients, and then I have amazing people that I can refer them on to. But then again, it's, you just trust your intuition. Just because you worked with me and you loved working with me, and I refer you to this person, then your intuition goes, no, but I should see them because Bronte said so. No, always listen to your intuition, always. But when you don't, it's when you find that you run into a thorn bush, so to speak.
Yeah, well, we know ourselves best in the end, don't we? And the older that we get, and I think when we've had chronic health issues, you become attuned, increasingly attuned to knowing when things aren't quite right, or when things are really good, or, as you say, when that practitioner's maybe not the right one at that point in time. We do, if we take the time to stop and listen, we usually do know. But it takes time and practice, definitely. And if we're just busy, if we're busy, and we're not stopping and listening, then often I think we do miss some of those clues.
Yes.
In terms of thyroid patients, are there common themes that you see, maybe triggers or...
common trigger, and I find this is not just with thyroid clients, I find this with my other clients as well, but before they got that diagnosis or the warning signs that, okay, you need to look at your health, that there was a period of stress, of high stress. And I spoke about that early on in this podcast, about how I had high stress. And I had high stress before both diagnoses. So, it's always that period of stress, and that's why it's so key to manage that. And I find that with my clients that have had relapse after relapse before coming to see me, again, it's the high stress that keeps triggering it.
The more I dig into it, the bigger it is. The bigger that seems to be as a trigger, and just so important. Like, I remember years ago, my doctor prescribed for me a week at a health retreat.
I love it.
I know. She said, you just need to learn to manage your stress. She said, I want you to go. And I'm like, are you going to write that down? I need to take that home to Lee. Like, you're actually going to prescribe that. And she did. And so it must be this divine place in Thailand that I've found at $10,000 a week. And of course, it had to be that one. And it was interesting because in that probably made me realize, managing stress actually really is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think before that I had really realised, and probably that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And so I think I've been on this journey to understand just how much stress impacts my own health. And I'm incredibly blessed. I haven't had a traumatic life. I have a husband that loves me, great parents. My kids are pretty good for 3 teenage boys, But what I've learned is it's not always trauma absolutely can be a trigger, and obviously that's stressful, but it can just be the day-to-day
absolutely
management of life, and that even if it doesn't feel like bad stress, our body can interpret that as stress and have that inflammatory response. So that's been a really big learning for me.
Yeah, because I think, you're saying what was common is that these women are go, 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 go all the time. And they'll go, well, I don't really feel stressed. And it's because if your baseline of no stress is here, I know people can't see because this is not a video, but So if your baseline is just draw a line, that's where your baseline is and you've got no stress. But then you've constantly got stress, so that line comes up. And so then you're constantly up there, this consistent stress. But then you sort of learn to adapt that that's your new normal. And so then you think, oh, you're not stressed, but your body actually is. So when I'm looking at the signs of my clients, like I do the tongue diagnosis. And when I look at their tongue, I'm like, oh my goodness, your body is so stressed. And I can see it in their tongue. So yeah, it's like you said, it's those daily things. And like for my clients, it's just, I tell them start small, start where you're at, just to have it that it's 5 minutes a day, that it's just for you. And you let your husband and you let your children know that this is mummy's time. Mummy's just taking 5 minutes to go and sit in the garden with a cup of tea, or go and sit in her bedroom and do a breathing exercise, or go and have a 5-minute shower by candlelight, and no one is allowed to even knock on the door. And I think that also comes back to setting your boundaries, loving yourself enough to set those boundaries, to create that sacred space just for you. And 5 minutes is not a lot to ask. And then you can maybe stretch it to 10 or 15, amazing, or 3 times 5 minutes, love yourself enough to do that.
Sometimes I think we think we've got to carve out an hour or, long periods of time, but 5 minutes, pretty doable.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I say to my clients is don't be sitting there with your cup of tea going, oh, shit, I've got to pack the lunches and I've got to do that load of washing, and oh, shit, I better not forget that I've got to get eggs, milk, blah, 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 blah. No. This 5 minutes is just for you. Sit there and daydream about whatever, or be present with the breath that's coming into your body. If you can do that, amazing. But don't be thinking about all the 101 things you've got to do, because then it's no point to the 5 minutes, right? That's a gratitude practice, if that's a breath work, if that's a visualization.
And so if you could look back in time to, Bronte, start of your thyroid story, are there 3 kind of things that you would go back and advice that you would give yourself, 3 things that you would do differently, or, just your top 3 tips that you would give yourself?
I would tell myself to not put so much pressure on myself about the healing journey, to enjoy the healing journey. And I know it sounds crazy because you feel like crap initially, and it's like, how do you enjoy that? But enjoy the process of learning about yourself. I am super grateful now that I was diagnosed with Graves. And for a long time in the initial stages, I was like, why did this happen to me? It's because I did this, this, and this in my life, or I had all these stressful, traumatic events in my life, and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, no, I'm super grateful because it was part of my awakening, and I've developed so much on so many levels because of this journey. So I'm super grateful for it. It was my awakening. So don't be so hard on myself. Enjoy the journey. I wish I probably had implemented meditation earlier. That would have been amazing, but it happened the way that it did. Yeah. I think mindset was huge for me in the process as well. I think earlier on I already trusted my intuition. From that first diagnosis, I was like, no, create my own 4th option. But I remember another key point when I was doing that whole reset in those first couple of months, and I was so damn hungry and I hadn't done enough food prep, and there was no way I was going to eat anything that wasn't off that list. That was off that list. I was so obsessed about the food, remember? And I remember going into the supermarket to try and find something to eat. And I was like, if I eat another banana, no. Because that was my go-to snack food. And I was like, I don't freaking feel like a banana. And I stood in the middle of the supermarket and I literally broke down crying, and people were just looking at me, and I'm just like, I can't eat anything. I was so upset. But I went home that night and I was like, okay, this process is going to be so hard unless I can shift my mindset. And so I chose to look at what I was gaining as opposed to what I perceived to be losing. Because if I kept going down the route that I was going without healing, I was going to lose my health even further, and I didn't want that. So, I think that was a huge turning point for me early on. Was just to change my perspective of where I was heading and what I was gaining.
Yeah, because otherwise, when you focus on all that, the deprivation and all the things you can't have, it becomes stressful, and then it becomes counterproductive.
Yeah,
Like
which comes back to emotional attachment to the food, right?
Yeah, I know. There's so much deep work to do, isn't there? Oh, there really is. There really is. Well, look, thank you so much, Bronte, for your time and for lots of wisdom that you've shared with us today. It's been really good.
Yeah, it was lovely to chat with you.
And look, if people want to get in touch with you, like I'll pop links in the show notes and things like that, but what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I'm most active on Instagram, so brontemay.naturopath. And it's the same for my Facebook. I'm just not as active on there. Like everything I post on Instagram goes through to my Facebook account. But yeah, I'm just not as active. My website is bronte-may.com. So you can find out about my thyroid reset program in there. If you want to work with me, reach out and say hi.
Did you know that one of the things that I offer is a free 30-minute strategy session? So if you want the opportunity to sit down with me, talk about your health goals and make a plan, create some action steps, or just talk things through with someone who gets it, then more than happy for you to book in for a strategy session. I'll put the link to that in the show notes. Send me a message and I'd love to connect with you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and share it with others that you know with thyroid problems. Let's get the message out there. If you'd like to connect with me further, the best place to do that is via my website, annabellebateman.com. From there, you'll be able to join my Facebook group, book a strategy session with me, download my freebie, and access any show notes for this episode. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
The information presented and discussed in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease and should not be used as a substitute for proper advice from a qualified professional.